Welcome to this short video to introduce the Accessing UCT Staff and/or Students for Research Purposes Policy and Standard Operating Procedure. This video is intended for researchers who are external to UCT, as in you are neither a student nor staff member based at UCT. In this video, we aim to raise awareness about UCT's policy and standard operating procedure for accessing UCT staff and/or students for research purposes. We'll call this the Access Policy throughout. We also aim to outline the purpose of the policy and procedures and to go through a few key aspects of the policy and standard operating procedure. The first important point to note is to whom this policy applies. It applies to anyone who wants to access UCT staff and/or students or use their data for research purposes. For the rest of this video, we will use the phrase UCT community to refer to UCT staff and/or students. You may be wondering why such a policy is needed. UCT is committed to protecting the rights, dignity, and welfare of its staff and students. As such, appropriate levels of ethical and institutional review and approval are provided for in the Access Policy and SOP. The interests of researchers may relate to the UCT community as participants in vital research questions. The ability for staff and students to participate in research is to be both used and conserved as a valuable collective resource. The Access Policy and SOP also seeks to promote best practice in the generation of knowledge, to protect the university and the participants from foreseeable harm, and to spread the burden of impacts upon researched persons in a transparent and publicly accountable manner. The definition of research used in the policy is a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. By extension, if you are planning to publish or make the data public in any form, you should, as best practice, engage with your Research Ethics Committee regarding their requirements around applications for such projects. This policy applies to any proposed research into the UCT community, in whole or in part, including research conducted or led by departments, divisions, or units using staff and student cohorts of their own or collaborating UCT structures, whether the research is of a developmental nature or otherwise. This policy applies to both requests for data and to requests that contemplate interactions or interventions involving the UCT community. The first step in your journey to using the UCT community or their data in your research is to obtain ethics clearance or approval from your home institution. You will need a formal approval in writing to submit to the appropriate UCT Research Ethics Committee. In addition, you should also familiarize yourself with UCT's policies and procedures for ethical research. These are available on the UCT Policies website or the Office of Research Integrity website. I'd like to draw your particular attention to the Responsible Conduct of Research policy, which sets guiding principles for responsible and ethical research. The next step in your journey to using the UCT community or their data in your research is to obtain ethics clearance or approval from the faculty or departmental research ethics committee based at UCT that most closely matches your discipline or project. For example, if you are a researcher based in management studies, or your project is about a management studies topic, then you should contact the Faculty of Commerce Research Ethics Committee. If you are a researcher who is studying the higher education space, then you should contact the Center for Higher Education and Development Research Ethics Committee. These details are available via the website address currently on screen. Each department or faculty has their own domain or discipline-specific requirements for obtaining permission via the Research Ethics Committee. You should follow the rules and regulations of the relevant department or faculty. This means that you will need to complete their application form and submit the documents required by their processes. You will also be required to complete the External Researcher Declaration form, available as Annexure B in the policy, stating that you will abide by best practice and UCT's policies related to responsible and ethical research. The final step in your journey is to obtain permission to engage with the UCT community. If you would like to access students or their data, you will need to contact the Department of Student Affairs to seek their permission. You will need to complete the DSA 100 form and submit your approval letter from your faculty or departmental research ethics committee and your UCT ethics approval letter. If you would like to access staff or their data, you will need to contact Human Resources to seek their permission. You will need to complete an HR 194 form and submit your ethics approval letter from your faculty or departmental research ethics committee and your UCT research ethics committee approval letter. If you are interested in using both UCT staff and students, you will need to get in touch with both the DSA and HR. All the contact details are available on the website displayed on your screen now. It is important to note that steps 1, 2, and 3 should happen sequentially, as in, you cannot apply for permission to access the UCT community via HR or the DSA until your UCT ethics approval is in place. However, if you are seeking to use both UCT staff and students, it is possible to engage with HR and the DSA simultaneously. This image shows you a detailed workflow for the steps you should take to access the UCT community for research purposes. I'd like to draw your attention to the different routes that your application might take while it is under consideration at HR. Please spend a few moments working your way through this workflow to fully understand the complete process that you will need to navigate before you can start your research. Lastly, I'd like to draw your attention to the notes in the top left corner, specifically that this simply represents the route through the system and does not assume that your application will be met with approval at each step. Approval should not be taken as a given. The other important point to note is that the UCT community are a very popular research population. There is an immense amount of research fatigue amongst the group. If people opt not to participate in your study, this choice must be respected. Researchers external to UCT who are using the UCT community as a research population must comply with the conditions in their ethics approval documentation from their home institutions and the UCT Research Ethics Committee, and any requirements set out by Human Resources or the Department of Student Affairs as appropriate. External researchers will be expected to comply with the following additional requirements in order to manage risk to the UCT community and to ensure transparent and consistent processes. They must complete a declaration by researchers, which will be required upon submission to the UCT Research Ethics Committee, and sign the declaration agreeing to abide by UCT rules and regulations relating to research practices when engaging with the UCT community. They are also required to report things to the UCT Ethics Committee. Researchers will be required to submit either an annual report or a standard closure report, whichever is most appropriate, to the UCT Research Ethics Committee, which initially granted permission for the research to take place. The submission of this report must take place within 8 weeks of completing the data collection portion of the research. And finally, suspension of approval. If or when a UCT and/or external research ethics committee establishes that a research project is not being conducted in line with the approved protocol, resulting in an infringement of the rights and/or welfare of the participants, the Research Ethics Committee may withdraw the approval from the project. In the event of withdrawing the approval, the Research Ethics Committee has the responsibility of notifying the researcher, Human Resources, and/or the Department of Student Affairs as appropriate, and also the researcher's home institution. Researchers are required to discontinue all research activities immediately and comply with any conditions stipulated by the Research Ethics Committee. The Research Ethics Committee may withdraw approval for any of the following reasons. 1. Unanticipated problems involving risk to the participants or institution. Or 2. Serious or continuing non-compliance with institutional approvals or legal regulations. Exemption from ethics review does not imply that there is no need for the project to consider and reflect upon ethical challenges which may be present or arise during the course of research. Oversight of research may still be required, and researchers will be required to abide by the accountability measures already discussed. Researchers who are unsure as to whether the research is exempted should seek confirmation from the relevant Research Ethics Committee. Research projects seeking exemption from UCT ethics review and approval must submit their research project with a short summary, along with a description of who at UCT will be engaged in the process, to the Interfaculty Research Ethics Committee, or the IFREC. The IFREC will review the request and make a determination of whether ethics exemption is appropriate or not. If it is not deemed appropriate, then the researcher will need to submit a formal application to a UCT Research Ethics Committee in order to seek ethics approval, following which an application to Human Resources and/or the Department of Student Affairs will also be required. If it is determined that a research project is exempt from UCT ethics review and approval, researchers are required to fully disclose the nature and purpose of the research with the intended or target populations. Additionally, targeted participants must be given the option to opt out of participating in the research, and this choice must be respected. If it is determined that the research project is exempt from UCT ethics review and approval, then the IFREC will issue the researcher with a formal letter confirming this. The letter will need to be shared with the institutional officials in HR or the Department of Student Affairs in order to access staff and/or students, and may also be required by publishers at a later date. The following types of research activities may be exempt from UCT ethics review and approval: institutional benchmarking and information gathering, research using publicly available documents or open access data sources, quality assurance and program evaluation activities. However, if there is any potential for these activities to be published, it is prudent to obtain ethics approval before the study begins, or to confirm that the research qualifies as exempted. UCT Research Ethics Committees do not grant retrospective ethics approval. Collection of non-human data, that is, policy documents, annual reports, and similar, and observation of people in public spaces or natural environments under certain criteria which are listed in the policy. Exemption from UCT ethics review does not imply that researchers are exempt from obtaining permission to engage with the UCT community from institutional authorities based in Human Resources and the Department of Student Affairs. If you wish to contact us, please use the contact details provided on this screen. Our email address is research.integrity@uct.ac.za. Thanks very much for taking the time to watch this video. If you want to contact us, our details are available on the previous slide or on the website that you're viewing this recording on.